Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Sri Damodara Janani by His Holiness Sri Damodara Swami. We are going to begin chapter 6 today. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hari Om Tat Sat. So, till yesterday we were reading how Mother Yashoda got Krishna after Krishna was found stealing the butter and breaking the churn and making a lot of mess in the house. Now in chapter 6, as the title says, the attempt to bind Krishna. This chapter is covering verses 15 and 16 of the 9th chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Dhamma Badhya Manasya Swar Bhakshya Kritagasaha Dvi Angulonam Abhut Tena Sandadhe Nyach Chakopika Yadachit Tad Api Nayunam Tena Yad Api Sandadhe Tad Api Dvi Angulam Nayunam Yadyad Adat Bandhanam. When Mother Yashoda was trying to bind the offending child, she saw that the binding rope was short by the distance the width of 2 fingers. Thus she brought another rope to join it. This new rope also was short by a measurement of 2 fingers. And when another rope was joined to it, it was still 2 fingers too short. As many ropes as she joined, all of them failed. Their shortness could not be overcome. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hari Om Tat Sat. Yashoda Devi was resolute in her determination to reform her son's character. He was now old enough to be disciplined and old enough to learn good behavior. Tying him up would teach him a good lesson, she thought, and it would give her freedom to complete her housework. Her mind inundated with pure love, Yashoda did not consider that the entire creation, beginning with the great Brahma and ending with the smallest insect, is bound by the qualities of her son's illusory powers. Instead, she thought that, like her, he was an ordinary human, so she set about the impossible task of binding the all-pervasive one. In time and after much exertion, she would succeed. Such is her good fortune, but it would not be an easy task, and 2 secret ingredients, besides a rope and an anchor, would be required. Yashoda, however, thought her plan simple and that her priority was acquiring the material ingredients. What would she tie him to? She did not have to look far. Just near the entrance of the courtyard of the palace lay a mortar that had been upset. That had been upset in her chase after him. It was a public mortar used by villagers and travelers. Was it he who had knocked it over or she? It did not matter. The mortar was conveniently close and was heavy enough to be anchor. Krishna understood what was on her mind. She is not tying me down, and definitely not to that. But she was. Mother Yashoda was not about to entertain any more nonsense. Forcibly dragging Krishna the few steps to the motor, she said, "Since you are so fond of motors, I will marry you to this one. You will be tethered like an elephant calf. Let the wedding begin." But that was easier said than done. And there was the rope with which to tie him. And where was the rope with which to tie him? In her hair. With a graceful movement of her left hand, Yashoda Devi took a golden cord that bound her braid at its root and dangled the silken tie in front of Krishna. Arching her lovely eyebrows, she shot a piercing glance at him, which he returned with 10 of his own. Was he like Daksha to be bound at the neck by a rope? Did she really think he was a docile baby elephant? Yashoda paused momentarily to consider which part of him to bind. Certainly not his wrists or calves, that would cause him pain, and his hands and feet were small enough so that he could wiggle free. He would have to be bound firmly. But how? At the waist, chuckled Yashoda. Well tied around the belly, your chubby behind and scheming head will not allow a rope to slip free. She giggled at her joke. That was not funny, he thought. Krishna did not know whether to scream or cry. How could he humiliate him? How could she humiliate him in this way? Just because I'm her son does not mean that I take birth, and just because I look like a human does not mean that I'm mortal. Both time and death fear me, does she not? No, she did not. Krishna's real identity was really beyond the range of sense perception. That is why he is called Adhokshaja. But Mother Yashoda's mind and senses were sanctified with thousands of feelings of love for her son. Those feelings made it impossible for her to think of him other than as a toddler and as her son. How could she fear him? She could not recognize his greatness. I am Vibhu, infinite. How does he propose to tie me? But the same motherly affection did not allow Yashoda Devi to think of Krishna as being infinite. However, the truth was that while Krishna felt very finite, when cuddled in her arms, he was simultaneously very unlimited. In trying to bind Krishna without his consent, Mother Yashoda would experience that unlimited nature of his. Wanting to bind him and actually binding him were two different things. The watching gopis doubted whether fettering Krishna would be as easy as Yashoda surmised. They whispered to each other so as not to anger their queen. He is not ordinary. If he does not want to be tied, who knows what illusions he will conjure up. There is no use trying to discourage the queen. She is as determined as he is resistant. The first silken cord was obviously too short for his waist, and so Yashoda reached for a similar one that tied the end of her braid. Still holding on to Krishna's hand, she cleverly tied the two silken cords together and tested the knot. It was strong. This would be enough for his waist, but what about rope to reach and encircle the mortar? That would have to come from elsewhere. Turning to the curious gopis, Yashoda saw two maidservants and ordered, "O Kurangavati and Lavangavati, please bring some smooth, soft robe made of jute. Do not delay, be quick." The women ran into the palace. What robe could they take to Mother Yashoda? They were gopis, and so their minds immediately turned to the gopis to the ropes that were made for churning yogurt and for tying cows. Wading through the stunning turmoil in Yashoda's storeroom, they reached for the tasseled churning ropes hanging from a peg. "Let us take 2 should be enough," said Kuranga. "Let us take a few more just in case," replied Lavanga. Having completed their mission, the two women returned to the front gate where a significant crowd was gathering. Now that Yashoda Devi was actively involving the villagers, word spread from house to house. Soon there arrived many opulently dressed gopis, the embodiments of motherly affection, accompanied by their curious sons and daughters, nicely dressed, ornamented and combed. Everyone was dressed for the Deepavali festival, but little did they know that they would be attending a festival much greater than the festival of lights. They were participating in a supreme festival of love, a Premavali. Silken cords no longer binding her hair, Yashoda Devi's braids loosened and locks hung over her forehead, accentuating her intense effort to educate Krishna. As beautiful as Yashoda was when carefully dressed and groomed, she was all the more beautiful when wind-blown from the exertions of loving devotion. The villagers looked on in amazement. Lavanga tied the ropes together and wrapped them around the mortar. The gopis tied the 4 churning ropes together, tassels and all. Then Lavanga thrice wrapped the entire length around the tapered center of the mortar, tying the shorter end to the longer. When the knot was tied, Lavanga held out the long end to Yashoda. But before joining the outstretched cord to the rope, Yashoda Devi would first have to tie Krishna's waist, and that would prove to be more difficult than she thought. Who does she think I am, he thought. Who does she think she is? By the arrangement of divine providence, a varied audience had gathered to witness this unique pastime. The demigods watched from the heavens, the birds and monkeys from trees, and the gopis, guards and children from the town square. And each of these observers had a different perspective on the mission that Mother Yashoda was about to undertake. The Vrajavasis' viewpoint was softened by Krishna's sweetness, while that of the demigods was illuminated by his opulence. Seen from the principles of transcendental mellows, the Vrajavasis' viewpoint was certainly more elevated, but that viewpoint could only be appreciated when the truths of Krishna's greatness were clearly understood. As Yashoda Devi held the cord with which she would tie Krishna's belly, the demigods excitedly conversed amongst themselves. How is it possible that this gopi thinks that she can bind the all-pervading one who cannot even be measured? Call it the illusion of love, since Lord Krishna has no beginning and no end, na purvam napi chaparam. There is the twine long enough to encircle his infinite proportions. Where will she find it? The Devas conferred amongst themselves, analyzing philosophically how Krishna's transcendental form was without limits. By doing so, they tasted spiritual bliss. The Lord existed before this universe because he is its creator, and he also continues to exist after the universe because he is its destroyer. He therefore has no beginning and no end in the way that we universal beings envisage such things. Moreover, being the creator and destroyer, he is actually outside the universe, trying to encompass him with a very insignificant part of this creation. A silken cord is therefore without meaning. Another demigod added, when it is said that the Lord has no beginning and no end, the actual meaning is that although we see his beautiful childish form, he actually has no front, no back, no sides, no top and no bottom. Not only that, he has neither inside nor outside, na chantar, na bahir. And Queen Yashoda should know that better than anyone else. A demigod reflected, when she looked inside his mouth, she not only saw the universe in him, but she saw herself along with him. In other words, his outside was in his inside. This is because he is all-pervading, and so inside and outside are futile concepts in relation to him. If therefore he has no inside or outside, how can he be enveloped by a rope and tied to one place? Krishna's limitlessness is synchronous with his all-pervasiveness, the two being features of his inconceivable nature and potencies. Savoring great pleasure, the celestials continue to elaborate on the all-pervasive nature of Yashoda's son. The wife of King Nanda does not realize that Lord Krishna is all-pervading, sarvavyapi. She is convinced that he is a human like her, but he is not. All-pervading means that he is everywhere, and so he has no outside. And since inside is the opposite of outside, he also has no inside. He is like the ether or the sky. He is everywhere. Can one tie up the sky? Another demigod chuckled. How could she think that he is an earthly being? Ordinary mortals have bones, flesh and organs covered by an external layer of skin, but Lord Krishna is the through and through concentrated essence of Satchidanand. Moreover, he looks the same inside as he does outside. One demigod questioned, could it be said that the inside he is the supersoul and outside he the child whom we see? The immediate reply came, no, he has the same form of concentrated ecstasy whether he is seen from inside or outside. Not only are Lord Krishna's inside and outside the same, but he is also within everything, because everything that exists is made of his potencies. Therefore, he has no outside to bind. Indeed, if Queen Yashoda paused to think, she would realize that he is within the ropes and that she wants to use to bind him. In other words, he cannot be bound because nothing exists that is distinct from him. A heavenly sage said, he is the cause of all causes, and so the universe and everything in it, ropes included, are he himself. Trying to bind him is like trying to burn a fire within a flame. The celestials applauded the example. Another sage added, being all-pervading in time also makes the Lord impervious to any time-bound actions, such as tied up. Right now he is not tied up, but Yashoda thinks that in a few moments he will be. She is strong. He is not restricted by time factor, and so he will remain in the same unfettered state in the future as he is now. As intelligent as they were, the demigods had difficulty in understanding the consequences of Krishna being all-pervasive in time. Nonetheless, they accepted what they had heard from authorities and tried to contemplate his greatness. Some reflected, he is untied now, therefore he will always remain untied to no matter what actions Queen Yashoda takes in the future. Purva Param. So we'll continue our reading from here onwards next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat, Hare Krishna. Stay blessed in the Damodar month.